6 months ago, after my divorce, I took some time off to rest. I ended up taking a European vacation literally for the first time in my life. I found this amazing little flat in Lisbon's cobblestone hills and consulted with a local guide who had a lot of knowledge of the place. Okay, I can't lie to you, I used ChatGPT to plan out the entire thing. At last, I told myself I finally have a chance to breathe. Well, that very first morning, I woke up and began sprinting into my routine. Running, meditation, shower, reading. What was I gonna wear? Where were my protein bars? And where was my water bottle? And just like that, I was running late. My train left at 10:30, but I knew I could still make it. So I called an Uber, sprinted downstairs, hopped in the back seat when I had realized I had forgotten my wallet. The Uber driver didn't speak any English, so there was a lot of this and a lot of that until he finally stopped. I jumped out, sprinted back upstairs, and as I began looking for my wallet, I looked down and I noticed my hand shaking. I was completely stressed and sweating for no reason when I said to myself, Chaz, if you miss the 10:30 train, just take the 11. I was completely free with nothing but time, and though I knew that, my body didn't. That's when I realized this wasn't about me forgetting my wallet or being a type A personality. This was about conditioning, about programming, something that was so deep I didn't even know it was there. See, along with my luggage, I had brought with me to Portugal the cellular memory of my ancestors, none of whom had the option of ever slowing down. For them, rest was not a possibility. Let me tell you about one of them. Austin Scott, my great-great-great-grandfather, was born enslaved on the William Hurt plantation in Sparta, Georgia in 1828. To some, that may seem like a long time ago. It's not. In human history, it's yesterday. For Austin, constant vigilance wasn't a personality trait. It was life or death. Rest was not an option. And here I am, 4 generations later, wearing that same expression and carrying that same trauma. That's when I realized this was about conditioning. This was about programming. Something that was so deep, I didn't even know it was there. That's when I realized I don't need more vacations. I needed reprogramming. We built a culture that equates exhaustion with excellence, where rest feels like failure and boundaries feel like betrayal. Millions are trapped in cycles of proving their worth through productivity, unable to slow down without guilt. Their nervous systems are stuck in survival mode, even when they're safe, confusing motion with progress. This especially impacts people of color, first-generational professionals, and women who've inherited the message that their presence is provisional. When you carry a family history where stopping means death or brutalization, your mind and body tells you that urgency equals safety. But what if I told you rest isn't a reward? It's a radical act of self-trust. And what if I told you those carrying generational trauma who are choosing to slow down, it isn't self-care, it's generational healing. We need to stop carrying our ancestors' survival strategies and start creating new patterns that honor them through genuine healing. When you carry a family history where stopping means death or brutalization, your mind and body tells you that urgency equals safety. This is what I call sacrificial guilt effect. Your nervous system interpreting rest as a threat to your survival. See, science already shows us that trauma lives in our bodies. New research on Holocaust survivor descendants show that trauma is passed down through generations, impacting stress hormone regulation. Adult children of survivors exhibit different stress hormone profiles, like lower cortisol, the hormone that returns to normal after trauma, and are much more likely to seek psychiatric care. This is just one example, but there are many more. The biological mechanism isn't fully understood, but millions from marginalized communities live with it daily. See, the Black community has long understood how centuries of trauma from enslavement have created new behaviors that are passed down through generation. What we call work ethic is actually a survival mechanism, cellular memory from our ancestors beaten for appearing lazy. That creates modern panic to rest like what I experienced that day in Portugal. The past isn't gone for those living its consequences in the present. We're so afraid of falling behind, we're burning out. So terrified of disappointing those that sacrificed, we're sacrificing our own health. Studies show that the highest burnout risk affects those whose nervous systems are already primed for hypervigilance due to generational trauma. I learned this the hard way. After college, I had the six-figure job, the BMW, and the DC condo. On paper, let me tell you, I had made it. But inside, I was waking up with anxiety, falling asleep at the wheel during my commute, and coming home with zero energy for the people I cared about. My body ran the same nervous system that kept Austin Scott alive in 1828. Constant vigilance, never stopping, never resting. What worked for survival then was destroying me now. I saw this when my dad asked, "Son, are you okay?" When someone who knows you asks you that question, they already know the answer. See, I took it as a sign that inherited programming no longer served me. I needed to change. And that's something that we all can do. And that's good news. If the nervous system can be trained, it can be retrained. And for me, that meant recognizing my belief that I always had to hustle wasn't honoring my ancestors, it was continuing their enslavement. The chains were gone, but I was extracting my own labor and sacrificing my own life. Rest isn't what you earn after proving yourself. Rest is what allows you to remember who you're meant to be. When I finally got on that train, it was the 11 o'clock train, something softened. I felt in my body that nothing fell apart because I chose to slow down. My life didn't crumble because I finally gave myself permission to breathe. But more than that, I felt my ancestors' presence. Not the same hypervigilant Austin Scott who had to survive, but the one who dreamed of freedom. The one who imagined his descendants having choices he never had. The one who would want me to experience the rest he was denied and not perpetuate forced exhaustion. This is reclamation. We're reclaiming our lives and our freedom of which our ancestors were robbed. New research on intergenerational healing show that when trauma survivor descendants heal stress responses, it influences genetic expression patterns that show up in their children. Scientists call this positive epigenetic inheritance. When we heal ourselves, it shows up in our biology and our future. Rest isn't what you earn after proving yourself. Rest is what allows you to remember who you're meant to be. When I finally visited that plantation where Austin Scott was enslaved, I took a selfie. It felt strange at first, but also important, almost sacred. Standing on that Georgia soil and holding my own phone up and seeing my own face against the backdrop of fields where my great-great-grandfather once labored, I saw something that stopped me. It was as if he was looking right back at me on that screen. I'm not talking about a physical resemblance. No photograph of Austin Scott was ever taken, and it took a lot of research to even learn his name, but it was something about my expression. The same hypervigilant eyes constantly scanning for threat, the same look of someone whose nervous system is perpetually telling him it's never safe to rest. And then it hit me. That expression wasn't something my ancestors chose. It was carved into their faces by force, by a system that demanded constant vigilance. And here I am, 200 years later, wearing that same expression and carrying that same trauma. That's when I realized what honoring him actually meant. It meant claiming the rest he was denied. It meant experiencing the peace he could only dream. And it meant breaking the cycles of inherited exhaustion and finally living like I was free. When we choose to rest, we not only heal ourselves, we heal everyone around us. When we set boundaries, we give others permission to do the same. When we prioritize well-being over productivity, we challenge everyone to ask why they're sacrificing themselves for systems that don't value their humanity. So start small, start today. Take that lunch break without guilt. Leave work at work. Say no to something draining and yes to something restorative. Because every time that you do and choose rest over rushing, ease over exhaustion, and joy over grinding, you're reclaiming the freedom of which our ancestors were robbed and reminding ourselves and our descendants that we're here to live fully, freely, in ways in which our ancestors can only dream. Rest isn't a reward, it's a right. Thank you.